All right, and hello, welcome to the Endless Report. This is episode 4, week 5. We weren't on last week, but we're here, week 5, new episode. And joining me today is Kaela. Hi, Kaela.
Hey, what's up? So glad to be here.
Thankful to have you here. So I'm Anthony, as always. We're gonna give you another episode today, full of stories, full of things to talk about. So right off the bat, I think we might as well just get into the stories and just see how many we can get through today. We have an interesting announcement yesterday. One of the biggest game franchises in the world, Call of Duty. The new title has just been announced. So we're going to see if we can pull that up here.
Yep, it's Vanguard.
Call of Duty Vanguard, yes. Oh, we're not getting the video here. Give me a moment. Let's see if we can get that up.
Yeah, we'll start it over. Today.
If you're a fan of that kind of game. So do you have any thoughts on that, Kaela? Or is that kind of in your interests, or just another Call of Duty?
So Call of Duty games aren't really my thing, but I will say this trailer is really fascinating. I am always impressed, of course, by their graphics and the level of detail that they go to with these. But did you see those faces?
That was so interesting. Sort of like mosaic made out of the environment of these different characters. So it looks like there's an emphasis on story with this game, which is interesting because in the past,
a battle royale with a story would be.
Yeah, because it's weird. It seems Call of Duty's been treading towards, abandoning the story modes. There was a story mode last year in Call of Duty Black Ops. Some people weren't a fan. It wasn't, the same as the past games. They typically had a tradition of having a single-player campaign. Now the industry's evolved. They've kind of jumped in the whole multiplayer battle royale, as a main games as a service platform. So Call of Duty now Warzone is more so of this platform that you hop into every day. It's constantly changing. There's new characters. I mean, they have like movie characters. They have like Die Hard and Rambo. They have like typical like pop culture, kind of like Fortnite, bringing in things for everybody to get involved. So you buy more skins, buy more extra microtransactions. So that's
right, of course.
Model. And so to see them kind of be like, we're gonna go to this historical approach, and here's like these character focus, and it's interesting to me because is this gonna continue to be this Warzone thing like they're saying, or is it gonna have a narrative single player campaign? Is that a multiplayer experience? I don't. That sounds interesting to me.
Yeah. Who knows where they'll go, but
Yeah.
I am also interested to see.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's interesting as these things evolve, where where the genres could lead, especially when it comes to storytelling in these games. So definitely interesting to see
Yeah.
where the next Call of Duty will lead. Especially with COVID and everything, and it's one of those game franchises where you could say it's like, oh, it's kind of the same every year. Or it's a new topic or just a new era, but a lot of work, like any game, a ton of work goes into these games, and it's exciting to see if maybe a new perspective and new story could win us over and be a title that people maybe that aren't a yearly COD purchaser would want to jump into.
Yeah, who knows? I could be the next victim.
Who knows? Maybe they could win you over with this one.
Maybe.
But speaking of games that are kind of more up our wheelhouse when it comes to RPGs and narrative games, another interesting story we have here, The Forgotten Cities. So have you heard about this game at all in the past?
Yeah, so I actually played this back when it was a mod for Skyrim. So this is a really interesting. I would love to talk about it a bit. Have you heard of the game before?
I have, and that's why this story was actually particularly interesting to me as well. It's a game that, like you said, started as a mod in Skyrim and now became a full-fledged, fully developed standalone title, and it's getting like rave reviews. It's on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and it's doing incredibly well. And that's something that started as a just a mod that people decided on their own time had a passion to create. And I love Skyrim modding. I don't know about you. I'm a huge fan of Skyrim. I know you are as well. So it's just really cool to see that, like, as being in this industry and being interested in game development, seeing something like that happen and being taken at that scale.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not the first time this has happened. I remember back when I played this in its Skyrim form, I thought it was one of the best Skyrim mods ever because, we have a lot of Skyrim mods that are just enhancing the game, fixing bugs, taking away those little inconveniences that lots of RPGs have. But I really always loved the ones that added something to the story. So this was one of those. And also another one, just to give it a shout out, is Enderal. Even before this one got its own standalone, Enderal had its own standalone as well that spawned from its mod work. And so this story, just to give you guys a little bit of information about it, the reason that it's so interesting is because it's basically entirely narrative-based gameplay, and it really is its own self-contained game within, as it was before, the Skyrim universe. Because you basically go underground to this forgotten city. So it's completely separated from the actual world that you usually play in Skyrim, which is why I think they could port it so easily to their own version. But again, they go deep underground and you find this city, and there's a bunch of statues around and they're all golden, and you slowly uncover, these were all people at one time, but there was a golden rule in this city created by the god who ruled over it. And the golden rule was don't commit any sins or else you'll all be turned into gold. And that's basically a death sentence, right? So everyone was terrified of committing sins. There was a lot of community focus on let's all be as good as we can, which you would think would create a utopia, right? Like this perfect society where everyone is sin-free, everyone's being kind and just not doing anything wrong. But as with all utopian societies, who gets to dictate what a sin is the key factor. It becomes a dystopia when not everyone agrees on what that means, or when there's some cruel overlord dictating this is what a sin is, when it's really just people trying to live their lives. So I always thought it was really interesting. You go through and talk to all the characters when you time travel back in time to before they were turned into statues, and your goal is basically to prevent the sin from occurring in the first place and make sure that they keep living. So I thought it was a really interesting game.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the thematic, just what you said from the thematic relevance of that, I think it's such a testament to the art form of video games that if you have this story and you want to ask these questions, these philosophical, what goes on in this scenario, like video games are such a great avenue to tell that. And it's just inspiring to see someone who wasn't working for a developer, just had this idea, had this passion, and made a mod, and then ended up growing into being something that could be probably a career for them, a huge success for them in this title. So it's awesome. And if you weren't aware of Skyrim modding, if you're watching this and you're like there are other games that this story has happened to. I mean, you look at DayZ was a game that kind of brought up a lot of the open world, not really battle royale, but kind of like that genre. It was DayZ was very popular for a time, and that was just a mod for a game called Arma. It was like a military sim game. I'm not sure if our viewers would be aware, all our viewers would be aware of that game, but it's like it branched out from like a very niche community, focused mod, and then it became its own standalone title, a whole own community. And that happens with games, that happens with genres. You see that with like battle royale. We've been talking about a lot. Like we have Player Unknown's Battlegrounds. That was a big game. Then you have Fortnite, which just took over the world afterwards. But Fortnite's not an original idea. It was kind of just like a reskin of another game. If you want to be critical of it like that through that lens. But of course, Fortnite's bigger and grander than that in so many ways now. But a lot of these ideas, it's just like the willingness to take ownership of an idea and put it in a form you want to put it into. Like sometimes you just got to start. So whether it's a mod or a small project, I guess just start your project and go for that idea, because things like that can happen. And it's cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, with anything in game design, you're almost never coming up with your entirely own unique idea. You're pretty much always branching off of other people's works, standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
There's been so much content created, and at this point, it's really hard to come up with a completely original idea, but you can definitely make it your own, and that's what modders do. And I think it's so fascinating. I mean, like you said, it's just passion projects, right? It's completely for free, or maybe for optional tips, but these people really just do it for free. And one other thing I was thinking of was, for all of these people who make a game inside of another game, basically, and then get enough traction to make their own standalone version, it must be great to have all of that work already put into it, because you're basically using another game as a prototyping tool. So you have an end product that you can just mimic. But think about how I would be so frustrated if I had to start at square one,
especially if
remaking
you have,
everything.
An intricate knowledge of all those systems. I'm sure you've got a million bugs and problems with that game. So to go back and be like, all right, start from square one. Let's just do this from scratch. And that surely is daunting. But I'm sure the opportunity, to be given an opportunity to make your game in a different light like that, or to have funding or publishing or that kind of context around it. I mean, I think, like you said, like it's like these passion projects, like that's just art. Like the fact that you can, create something like that was on the shoulders of giants. Like you said, that was that. All art is in some way derivative. Like we're all products of our own experience and our own exposure to other art forms and inspirations, and that's great, because we all have our own combination of influences that create something unique. So to be able to, cross that barrier of passion project to then being published, it's a very different atmosphere, I think, because whether, not to paint a bad picture of the financial aspect of it, the big bad corporate destroying creativity, because it's not always like that, but there has to be a balance, and those are things that work together. So when you are working not just not for free, but for a specified purpose, and this is the outcome you want, and this is what the audience is looking for, there comes with a lot of things attached to that, especially when you need funding for a game, time, money. There are a lot of real world consequences. So it's interesting, and it's exciting to see that someone who starts just with modding and passion project could be rewarded into getting into that industry in a way that's not just maybe working up a different pathway you didn't want to work up towards. You could just start with your own passion, which is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a ton of solo devs or small teams that make it big pretty much magically just by having such good content that they get their own attention organically. So it's amazing for those people.
For sure. I think Among Us was a recent game where it was like a 2-3 person dev team, I think at the start or something, and they just blew up, and it's awesome to see that happen for people.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. But I guess sticking on the topic of modding and Skyrim in general, we have another pretty interesting story in the Skyrim modding community. We'll pull this up here.
Yeah.
So you want to introduce this one?
Yeah. So Nexus Mods is a really popular place for mods in general, but especially Skyrim mods. That's where I got the Forgotten City when it was first released for just Skyrim. And there's been an interesting change in the way that they're running their website. Users basically will no longer be able to delete their mods. And you might think, well, that's strange. I mean, it's their mod. They should be able to take it down. And I agree with you. But I do think that they make a good point in why they want this feature to exist. basically they're replacing it with an archiving system. And the way this changes things is that instead of deleting it entirely, if you archive it, it'll no longer be on your modding page. No one else will be able to see it anymore, but the files will all still exist, because when some people create mods, they make them based off of the existence of other mods. It's like a chain reaction where, okay, you need this other mod by this other person in order for my mod to work. So if someone were to delete one of those mods that another mod relies on, then you have multiple mods that are just not working anymore. And that can be a problem for other content creators. So it's kind of this weird conversation of like, well, I want ownership of my content. I want to be able to take it down whenever I want to. And that makes sense. But also, like, if it's this is a community experience, right? The whole reason that we make mods is to support the community and keep these games alive. So you wouldn't want to, mess up anyone else's work. So I don't know. Like, I think it makes sense that this change is being implemented, but it also makes sense that content creators are a little bit upset. Like, well, this is my personal property and my work. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because again, like looking from that perspective of the content creators, it's like, of course, like I made this. I'm not even getting paid for it, but like I made this on my own volition. So if I want to, take that down, it's my intellectual property. So I 100% understand that and kind of, support that. But at the same time, like you said, like the way Nexus mods works, and doesn't necessarily have to work this way, but if you're modding Skyrim, you usually have a load order, you usually have multiple mods in once, you usually have mods that kind of cascade. And if I have, for example, if you're not familiar with Skyrim modding, for someone watching, like say it's a game from 2011 that people have been modding for basically a decade on, and have just created it into and just expanded it to continue keeping it at the pretty much pinnacle of graphical updates, feature updates, different weather systems, like you said, full-on quest mods where you're just adding full-on like DLC type story content to the game, extra characters, weapons, armor, you name it, like just extra content. You can pretty much add anything to Skyrim you want. So when you have mods like weather mods that rely on other artists' work or subsets of effects to make all this work together, when one person jumps out, jump ship from the site, you're taking that link of this piece, this puzzle piece we put together to create this perfect like mod list. You're taking that link out, and that link is crucial to every other link on the chain. So that just collapses everything. So
right, it's like a Jenga tower, and if you like pull out the wrong one, then everything else just breaks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like if this is a group thing, like we're all contributing to the chain, like. Yeah, do you own your link of the chain? Of course you do, but like you are also kind of letting everybody else down if you rip it out, especially unprovoked. But I do think the reason, and if we look at this article, Arthmore is a very popular mod author. They created alternate start for Skyrim, which takes away the intro to Skyrim, which is very long character creation. It takes probably a half hour or more, depending on how long you create your character, just to start the game. So their mod alternate start is basically just a quick little, this is what I want to do. I can be at any role, any point of view in this entire open world and just start where I want. I don't have to go through all of the intro and all of the universe, backstory. I can just start this game, make a new character, and the flick, the snap. And that mod, there are a lot of mods that kind of bank off of that and say, well, if you're going to start in this environment, then this is like the kind of mod you'll be. Like there are subsequent mods of that, but there are also like millions of downloads for that mod. It's probably the most popular mod, if not one of the most popular mods, besides like Sky UI or one of the other like bug fixes on the entire site. So it's when you have like a mod that kind of defines like the basics of Skyrim modding, and this artist is saying I'm gone because I don't like the idea that you're just going to basically like now package my content and then like give it, not sell it, but kind of
like force me to continue distributing it.
Force distribution of my work with no recourse for that. I understand where they're coming from, and I honestly don't like the idea of that either if I were them. So to me, it's like, yeah, does it stink that you're kind of changing Nexus mods, this site forever, because you're essentially taking the heart of like this modding community out of it? Is it worth having this new packaging system? And I like the idea of the packaging system, especially when like we said, this chain of things interacting with each other. If you want to download like a mod list from somebody, their new system would allow you to just download a list say all these mods work together, they're awesome, hit download, and then once you're done, you have like a new version of Skyrim. Versus, like I'm sure you're aware of modeling yourself and going mod by mod and downloading and then fixing the load order and figuring out how you're not going to break your own computer when you do it yourself. So it would be way better for the consumer. So I understand where Nexus is coming from, but on the other hand of things, there are people making this content for us. It's not just magical game fairies. These are developers, just like any other developer. They are developing content, and they deserve respect on what content they're publishing and where it is, and if they're allowed to keep it there. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of entitlement with consumers of the game industry, like, give me this game, like give me content, and it's like, well, we have to work really hard to make this content, and
people make this content.
And to be fair to Arthmore, there are other websites, so he's not completely just removing his content from the internet. It's being moved to another site, but like you were saying, I mean, I don't know if any of you tuning in have experience with modding, but it can be a really painstaking process because you have to have this other software that plugs into the game. And then if something breaks, you have to basically, the worst with modding is when you have to like turn off all of your mods and then turn them on one by one and figure out which one is breaking your game so that you can isolate it. And that's just, I can't imagine having to go to 2 different sites and 2 different softwares in order to get that done. Or even like more.
You just restart because you get frustrated, and I just delete everything or just reorder it.
Wipe it. And that's the other thing. Like you could, if you remove your content and just don't support it anymore, I don't know if it would uninstall it locally from your computer, but if it did, I mean, okay, that's good, because otherwise you'd be like breaking people's games.
Yeah, you can't do that. That would be like selling a game or selling a movie or something, like saying, this DVD doesn't work anymore, or something like that. I do think. I guess it's tough when we talk about like the ethics of like what people expect. I guess it's tough with digital media because it's like, you send a tweet out or you sending something and you put something on the internet, that's a little piece of you. Whether or not you stand by that, or not, like you put that out. If you delete it, it's still there on some records and maybe it'll be found. So when it comes to content, especially content that in some cases is monetized, obviously when it's modding, it's not. But when you come to like produced work, like content, I pumped out, like as this mod creator, you would expect that you have autonomy over that. So I again completely understand that. But at the same time, if I download your mod and you say a year later, you know what, I don't really want to have this mod public anymore, and I delete this mod, that's fair to you. But you're not deleting the files on my computer. I already downloaded it. That was an internet transaction. Like that, I have that. That's over. But now I may be like, oh, well, here's this game. Like it's happened with games before. There's been. I think PT was a really big example. I don't know if it was like horror demo for Silent Hills, big Hideo Kojima game, and that game got immediately canceled. There were publisher issues with Konami and Sony. Basically, that game got deleted off the face of the earth, and if you off the PlayStation Store, everything. So if you didn't download it, that like a week or 2 days it was up, you didn't have it. But meanwhile, it was like a cult classic. A ton of people did download it, and they kept it on their consoles. It's like a safe keeping of it for years afterward. So software does get kind of like pulled away in this day and age, and that is kind of an interesting dilemma of like ethically what is ownership of software? Is it full ownership of the artist, or if I was a painter before computers and I sold a painting, do I have the right to say, what, I don't really like what I painted there, can I come and take that back? Like I don't know, I sold you that painting, like that transaction's over. So as much as I do support the mod creators, I'm like, at the same time, you can't delete files on my computer. So if you want to opt out of this website and opt out of this package deal and this new way of Nexus mods working, that's fine. That's up to you. But on the perspective of Nexus mods, that may not be the best idea to have a deletion policy if you're wanting to stay the center of modding and to be that site for the years to come. It may have a turn for the worse for them. People may go elsewhere. So that's a tough dilemma for them, I think.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation. But speaking of the alternate start, why don't we talk about some funny story that arose from the original start of Skyrim?
Absolutely. This is great. So we'll pull this up. So just to give a little video here in the background. So originally, as we talked about before, the intro of Skyrim, you start off coming into in a cart. You are arrested at the border, and you're walking along in a cart, and the animators of this animation decided that when they started this game, they were going to do a full live animation in engine, nothing pre-rendered. All the physics of the game will be working. And as you see here, bugs arose in the engine. There were physics bugs, and a lot of times the car can just get launched into space and just completely out of nowhere. So this is kind of like the worst case scenario of game physics going wrong here. And it was just a fun developer story that kind of explained why this happened. And if you want to share why specifically this was an issue.
Yeah, I'm going to pause the video now because I feel a little sick after
little
watching
dizzy.
that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like being a developer and having to watch this over and over again as you're playtesting?
And trying to play test and fix that.
I think I would definitely throw up like multiple times.
And I think according to the story, I think they watched it like hundreds of times too. So that did happen.
Yeah. So what happened is usually if you have something that's just like playing out and repeated, it'll just be a cutscene, right? And you can't really interact with that. But that's not what the Skyrim developers wanted the user experience to be. They want to put you right into the game, right into the action. They want to give you some autonomy over looking around, where you look at in this cart scene. And they want you to have some dialogue options once you get out of the cart. So they didn't want it to be a cutscene. They wanted it to be immediately immersed in this game environment. And in order to do that, like you said, they had physics working for the cart. It was actually moving in the game world. Everything was fully animated in the game world. But that also means that the cart was interacting with other physics systems. And so if you've tuned into any of the Feisty Ferret stuff, we've talked about collisions before. And when you have physics collisions, something happens, right? When two physics objects bump into each other. And it could be that one of them just pushes the other away, or, they have a bounce effect or something. And so all of a sudden during development, the cart was just being launched into the air. And they were like, it's not happening every time we play it. So it's not a consistent bug. And those are the worst kinds. They're the trickiest because you're like, I'm going insane. Yeah. Something is going wrong occasionally. Yeah, but not every time. I can't track it down. And so I think what was happening was there was a bee, and because it didn't have like a specified path every time, like a real bee, so good AI, it would go on different paths every time. And sometimes it would get in the way of the cart. And apparently the bee's collision was so strong that instead of the cart moving the bee, like in real life, the bee moved the cart. So the bee was like, I'm not moving. And the cart said, okay, goodbye. I'm launching into space. So it's so funny.
Yeah, it's just a funny story of game dev, especially for people learning game dev, because it's like, you set the laws. There are no laws of physics here. Like you set the physics, you create these physics. So if you want a live animation, if you don't want something that's just a pre-baked animation, it's there, it's rendered, it just happens same way as all, because you animated it that way. Then if you want a live in-game simulation happening, then you need to account for all of these collisions, all of these weights and of these objects and how they interact. And it's funny that something as small as just a little bee character that just flies around the environment and probably they didn't even realize was part of the scene, maybe just a bee on a leaf across the side of the road, was just creating this colossal problem where it had so much collision in it that it was the unmovable object. So I think it's funny where you just see how one little issue in a game, or someone said why don't you just add this one little thing? And it's like, when you add one little thing, it can end up breaking every other system you made from the beginning. So when people complain about certain things in game design, it's easy to go, well, let's think about it this as a developer. What would that entail even doing that? For example, difficulties in games. You may say the hard mode is not that great. It's just they just up the damage on the enemies. It's because to make an actual different skill level, you have to basically redo every system in the game over again. If you want to do that without just buffing numbers and trying to do something simple, you have to basically revisit every mechanic and make sure everything doesn't break in every little step of development. And some things probably will. When you're trying to do it in a different way, everything's going to break eventually. That's kind of like a golden rule of coding. There's always going to be an error. There's always going to be another bug. Once you pick the bug, sometimes you create 3 more. It's just the way it goes. So
yeah,
there's a lot. Again, if there's a theme of this episode today, it's a lot of work goes into that, and it's just funny to see that was probably a serious issue for weeks on end. That there was just why isn't this animation working? And it's flying like a spaceship into orbit, and it's just because of something little like that, a little bug they added in the game, just to be able to catch. And because you could catch the bug and had to have collision for that reason, that's why it broke their entire intro. So it's funny how things like that happen. I just thought that was a really interesting story. I'm happy we were able to cover that.
Yeah. I mean, it's an innocent little change, right? Oh, just add some bugs so you can catch them. But seriously, anytime you make a change to the game, no matter how small, you are affecting all of the other teams. And, thank goodness that QA exists. It's such a not talked about aspect of game development. Like, they're barely considered by some people to be developers, but they are
Yeah,
an
it's
integral
crazy.
part of the process. Like, if we didn't have QA people to catch those bugs and to be constantly playing our game with every little change that we make, you know, they have to be, I mean, I couldn't imagine working full time as a playtester
Yeah.
because I would get so sick. I would never play a video game again.
Yeah,
Like,
you
I
wouldn't
would
play because
never.
I think people are like, "Oh wow, you just play video games? That's your whole job? That's what QA is?" And it's like, no, you're
It's
playing one
like,
game, like basically trying to break it, just brutally, like hitting every point of interaction you can in the entire game. To the point where you're not even really playing it, you're kind of just like trying to break the engine.
yeah,
And
you're poking at the bear,
I'm
trying
not
to
a, I'm not a
find the
QA tester,
cracks.
so maybe that's even an oversimplification. But it isn't. I know it's an insane amount of work and time because you have to pinpoint every problem with that game and make sure it's working properly. And that is no small feat. That is not just playing games for fun. That is a full-time development job, and it deserves that respect for sure. Because that's so much bug fixing, so much bug just logging all the bugs for the development team to then take care of. And sometimes it may be hard to pinpoint even what that bug is or why something's happening and what's the
Exactly.
source, what's really the bug. Maybe you're just seeing the effects of the bug. So it's a very time consuming and I'm sure painstaking process that should be, like underappreciated or just thought to be an easy, like I'm just playing games, because it's definitely not.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then the other, I think, moral of the story, besides, playtesting is important and a lot of work goes into games, it's just that bugs can be funny. Like, I'm sure it was not funny at the time to these
Not at all, yeah.
developers. I'm sure they were pulling their hair out trying to figure
Yeah.
out what was going on. But looking back on it, like, there are so many funny bugs in game development. Like, it's just great to be able to, like, as a team, be like, haha, come look at this thing that's happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, I'll do that now with like, I create AIs for the game that I'm working on now, and sometimes, like, they'll do something goofy and I'm just like, hey guys, come look at this, and they're like, oh no, what's wrong? And I was like, oh no, it's just funny. Like, just look at them being silly, they're goofy. So yeah, I love that part of game design, and I think it kind of
For sure.
alleviates some of the pressure. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
obviously upsetting when you run into a bug, like, oh, it's not working, but like, it's funny sometimes when it doesn't work.
Especially
So
at the beginning too, and like I'm sure they had laughed a lot about that issue at Bethesda until it was like week 3 of bug fixing.
yeah,
Like, all right, now we need to fix
please.
this cart. Let's just get this cart rolling. Like, I'm sure
Yeah,
at first,
literally.
like, oh, look, it's hilarious, and now it's just like, let's just make sure this happens.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's cool to see, like you said, that like at any level, any studio, even the most iconic game moments and things go wrong, and there's a lot of work that goes into like making sure it doesn't go wrong. So it's cool to see that, like, if you're getting frustrated or you're hitting a lot of barriers in your coding or your development experience, and you're thinking, oh, there's so many bugs, like what, is there something wrong with what I'm doing? And it's like, no, like literally everybody who programs or develops anything, you're gonna run into bugs, you're gonna run into problems. It's literally problem solving. So
Yep.
I think I've seen people in the past, and even myself when I started coding, was like, I can't get past this barrier here. Like, oh, I'm not good at this, or I'm not gonna be able to do this. And it's like, no, that is what you're solving. That problem is what coding is. It's not that you don't know how to code. It's that you're always gonna run into those issues, and it's how you figure that out and how you reformat that with the engine or the code or whatever you're doing is what's really the main job.
Yep, absolutely. It's less about the knowledge that you come in with and more about just how you approach running into roadblocks. So don't get discouraged if you're starting out. And also try to find the humor in things.
Exactly. It's like we said, it's a puzzle. Like if you get one puzzle piece wrong, pick it up. It doesn't fit, try to fit it somewhere else. Don't be like, oh no, I don't know how to do a puzzle just because this doesn't go here. Like every piece is not going to go where you want it to go when you first try. There's always going to be a pitfall. So you have to just, roll with the punches and remember that, you're every new problem you solve, you're one step closer.
Yep, I completely agree. All right, do we want to talk about another story?
Yeah, I think we might as well move on. Speaking in that vein, we have another story about an indie developer. So we want to pull that up. We can talk about that for a minute here. And
yeah, so I'm just going to pull up the page of his game.
Awesome. Very cool page, by the way. So a little bigger.
Yeah, so this game is Scrabdackle, and it's by a developer who calls themselves Jake Friend. And this big story, the reason it's getting so much attention right now, I mean, it's super cute. Look at it. The Kickstarter recently ended, and they were able to raise, I think, about $45,000 for this game, which is, a significant amount. And I think that Jake Friend said that would probably give them about 10 months worth of development time. So that's great for them. They're literally doing this all by themselves, hand drawing all of these little guys, doing all of the programming work. And I even played the demo a little bit myself. I think I can play the demo here.
Awesome.
And it was super cute. Everything's super polished, and all of the systems are really juicy and like eye-catching. Everything's adorable. So a studio approached Jake Friend and asked, would you like to, sign a contract with us and get like a publisher behind this for you so that you're not doing this all by yourself? And that sounds like a dream come true, right? For any indie developer, especially a solo developer, to be basically offered all of this money, all of this time, and probably team members to come in and help you finish this project. It's like someone believes in you, right? So it sounds like an amazing proposition. And this contract was for $500,000. That's $500,000. So like I'm saying, it sounds like a dream come true,
that
right?
Sounds good, right? Yeah.
Right. Except Jake Friend decided to turn it down. And luckily for us, they were very open about it on Twitter because they weren't under an NDA, aka a non-disclosure agreement. We don't know what studio it was, and I'll talk about why that is later because it is intentional. But basically, the contract was insane. Like, Jake Friend would have lost so much monetarily if they had messed up at all in this development process. And they decided that wasn't acceptable terms, and the company wouldn't budge on it. And one of those unacceptable terms, I think the one that's worst, in my opinion, is that if the developer breached the contract, all rights to the game would be forfeited, and worse, the developer would have to pay for all further development costs out of pocket. So if they breached the contract, then they wouldn't be allowed to touch their game at all anymore. It would no longer belong to them. And they would have to pay for the rest of the development? What?
That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound right. And the thing is, the reason that this was such an exploitative term and condition in this contract is because breaching the contract is not defined. So at any point, the company, and I don't think that they would do this, but they could at any point just kind of say, you breached the contract.
Yes.
And Jake Friend would be like, what do you mean? Define that. And they're like, we don't have to. We didn't define it in the contract. So it's just whenever we say you're breaching it. So that's really dangerous, right? And basically, I mean, if you think about this is a solo dev. They're not some rich person who has all the money in the world. Otherwise, they wouldn't need a Kickstarter, right? Like they need funds. Like they're just doing this because they believe in their product. And if they had to pay for all development costs out of pocket, they would be in debt and not have gained anything from this experience whatsoever. And yeah, it just sounds like a terrible situation to be in. So Jake Friend was really honest and upfront about this contract that they turned down. And the reason that they haven't come out and said which studio it was is because there's all these people replying on Twitter like, oh, I think I know what company it is because I've seen a similar contract. And the thing is, all of them are probably wrong. And the reason that they think they know what the studio is and they're wrong is because all the studios do this. Yeah. So by not saying exactly which company it is, no company has deniability of it.
Yeah.
And it's putting pressure on all of these studios to relook at their contracts and back off from their exploitative terms because, I mean, I don't think that they're intentionally trying to harm these indie developers, but it's just the norm to have these.
Yeah, if they can gain, and that's the way that it's normally been, why not gain from those properties that you're hiring these people that you own their property now? It's funny you say that because there was just recently a story about Amazon game studios where they've been struggling for a few years now since they started to release like a full project. They've had some early access games and stuff like that, but they also have a developer policy where it's like if you want to do your own project outside of Amazon Studios, you can, but it's also we're not going to give you any help, and you can't use any Amazon resource whatsoever. It has to be off work policy, which makes sense. But at the same time, we also own your game and all profits and like everything. And it's like, well, why? If I'm not allowed to use any of your resources that you give me as an employee, and I have to do all the work myself and not without anything, but you also own everything I do just because I also work for you, and it's like it's a tough like middle ground where like if you're an artist and you want to work on a solo project, which many game devs do. Where do we draw the line of what's competing with that? I get if you're working for Bethesda Game Studios and you're making Skyrim and you want to make you want to make like a Witcher type like RPG at the same time, maybe that's not advisable to make a competing game in the same genre or something like. But then again, if you're making a small indie project and you're working for a billion-trillion-dollar company, especially with Amazon, it's $1 trillion company. Why are you policing what I can create and can if it has nothing to do? Again, it's only for the profit of the company and not really focusing on the artistic intent or anything like that. So again, maybe that's why. Maybe it was them. Maybe it was just another policy just like that, and that would put pressure on them to revert that, because they did just revert that policy about like 2 days ago. It was very
Yeah.
recently, so it could be in the same vein of this is something that's very actively being talked about within the industry right now between these companies or between these company executives. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it does change and that companies all over the place take a new look at their contracts and
For
rewrite
sure.
them a little bit. But I think it also just raises a question of like, you know, if games are art and if we're inspired as developers to create this content and if it's not something that we're being paid to do, if we are doing this out of our own intent, it's like making any kind of media just for
Yeah,
yourself.
it's like it's not
And
your
it's,
business. Like,
yeah,
let me
like
do my own personal thing. Like,
it's so strange to forcibly attach it to whoever you're working for, and also to like put these weird monetary restrictions on them.
yeah,
Like, this is my art, this is my emotions being poured into something that I'm creating out of my own volition and for
yeah,
no other intention than I'm just inspired. And to say like, okay, well, I'm basically punishing you for doing that, and you have to pay to finish it, or we own it after it's done, even
yeah.
though
Which
it's
is crazy.
completely yours. Like, it's
Because
just,
in a way,
it,
you're already being punished for it just from having that idea. Because again, like we talked about before, there is reality too, where you may need funds and you just need that money just to be able to make that. And there's no no one's telling you need that or telling you need to develop in this time. But you know what? I need to develop like in his scenario. I have 10 months to develop on this budget, and after that, I'm not able to do so. So there are limits to being able to you know find take your imagination to its fullest potential. Like, you do have limits on you in terms of reality and funding and just terms of time and resources. So with all that already in play, and like you said, it's art, to just limit someone else's art. I mean, we see this in every other industry too, whether it's music, movies. Like, if you're a small developer on a movie team, you're a camera. Not to diminish any of those roles, but if you're not a director or a producer, you don't have anything to do with the story. You're just working on a camera crew, or you're editing or something like that. You it, would you want a studio to say, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're not allowed to edit any other videos out of this side of the job, or you can't make your own video for yourself or do anything like that just because you're working on this one project at this time." It's very limiting, and
yeah,
it's not really conducive to like again, like if I'm working, if you're under that company and there are realistic limits on that content and what they need to make their profit margins and everything like that. That's their business. That's their that's their product. When it comes to your own personal work that has nothing to do with their product, it's almost like the audacity to want to profit from something that you're also discouraging the person to do. It's just not doesn't sit
yeah.
well with me.
Yeah, reality is super discouraging. Like, just being faced with
Fortunately,
money and time
yeah.
restrictions, it's just like, oh, all my inspiration just drains out whenever I think about those
But that's life.
things.
Unfortunately, we can't always all do exactly what we want to do at all times. But it is a courageous notion to fight for what you're inspired by, and to work on and to put hard work into what you're really inspired to do. So I think that's just another lesson in a lot of these stories today. It's just to kind of remember, like, you have value in your own work, your inspiration, your story. If you love what you bring to the table and you love your game, stand by that. Like,
Yeah,
don't just sell it away to somebody just because you think that's a safe move, or that's what's going to be it's going to secure it, or I made it, like that kind of thing. Like, this is now it's real because someone's interested. But make sure that what they're interested in is helping you. Make sure it's not just they're interested in stripping all of your gain for parts and just profiting off of your work and
yeah,
taking away your ownership. That may not be the right move. So I think, like we said in the past, try to develop, try to mod, try to do things, but don't you know realize that you are creating content, you are creating, developing game content, and that deserves to be treated in the right way.
yeah. I think what you said just now was really interesting and resonated with me. It's only interesting because someone's like, or it's only real because someone's interested
Yeah.
now. Like, that's such a real feeling for me. Like if I'm working on my own projects, I'm just like, oh, twiddling my thumbs. I'm just trying to do so. And I feel embarrassed by it until someone else says, I like this. And then I'm like, oh, really? Now I'm proud of myself, And you should be able to find that intrinsically. Like if you're proud enough to be able to work on it at all, then that's, you don't need someone else to be like, I think this is cool. If you think it's cool, then that's enough. So
yeah, and I think that you need to value when you do get good criticism or compliments. Either way, you need to value that when someone sincerely cares about your game and is interested, because like we talked about with these publishers, and not to villainize like all these big companies, like no, there are good things that happen, and there are deals that are made with big companies, and there are success stories of games that aren't doom and gloom. So it's not to paint that kind of picture, but you do need to be wary that not everybody's going to be your best friend. People are out to make money. They're out to they're out to have their own successes. They're out to make their own moves in the industry. And if you want to collaborate with other people or be a part of that, you got to be on the same page and be on the same wavelength of what those intentions are. And I think it's not something that's exclusive to video games. I mean, we've seen it in the past when it comes to, I think the music industry has often talked about how artists have struggled to profit from their music, given how record deals and things like that go down. I mean, there are things where it's like, here's like, $500 for that song. It's like, oh my God, $500. Like, no one likes my music. I'm a nobody. Here you go. And then they own that song forever. And then they're making like millions of dollars in the next 40 years off that one song. So it's like, it's tough when you don't have that reference of, 2020 vision of what's going to happen. So, it's easy to say, in retrospect, oh man, I could have done a better deal here. It's like everybody can say that when you've lost out on a deal, but things happen like that. You shouldn't feel bad when things like that happen, but you should look out to defend yourself and look to make sure that you're getting due respect or due recognition for what you're putting out there, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of other industries such as music, do you want to talk a little bit about the movie news that we have?
Sure thing, absolutely. So I don't know if people have heard about this. There's been a lot of marketing for this movie, but then it got delayed, obviously, with everything else with COVID. It got delayed about a full year. And we'll pull the trailer too. This is Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. So it's actually interesting because I think we talked about it earlier when we pulled this article in the first place, that we see a lot of video game movies in the past. We talked just last week, Corey and I talked about some of the new serious video game productions that are coming to television in terms of The Last of Us. We have Halo, Fallout, all getting new TV series. So we're seeing a lot of respect towards video game series in ways that we haven't seen in the past. And because there has been sort of a negative connotation about what is a video game movie. Is it just, using these stereotypical old arcade terms to have fun with the character? But this movie is something different. Free Guy is about a free NPC in a modern, open world video game. And this is a movie neither of us have seen yet, so I don't want to, we're not spoiling anything here, anything too deep into the plot lines. But as you can see from this trailer, it's an NPC in a video game that discovers that he's in a video game. It's like, discovering you're in the Matrix, and he goes, what is going on here? What are all these intricate systems? And I guess the whole movie is kind of unraveling the inner workings of this universe, of his world, which is really a video game. So, again, it's a pretty cool philosophical concept. It looks fun. It looks like a nice, kind of fun comedy action film. At the same time, it brings a lot of questions about, philosophical questions about simulation and AI, and what if an AI actually did start having thoughts? It's just a fun topic to think about, because it's something I feel like with science, not just science fiction, but with technological developments, with virtual reality, with things we talk about every day in the games industry, of wow, look how exciting the future it is. It's a pretty timely movie to finally see a movie actually tackle modern game concepts and look into what that could be in the future, instead of kind of gamifying the whole experience and maybe not taking it at face value for what video games actually are. And I think that this movie looks to be something that's actually going to give some accuracy and some nods to actual fans of video games, and I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. I think that a lot of games that I associate, or a lot of movies that I associate with games are like Wreck-It Ralph and Jumanji, and they're all such old style games. They're really pulling off of the arcade style of game. Whereas this one, the producer of it did a lot of research, and I think you can see it even in the trailer, of different games like Fortnite and Grand Theft Auto. They did Red Dead Redemption. They even talked about researching with Shadow of the Colossus, which is a really artistic game, and definitely not the kind of game, but he really did his research, And I think it's really shown, you can see them doing little dances like they do in Fortnite, and you could see ragdoll physics when he got hit by that car. And yeah, I just think it's a really interesting concept. I'm excited to see the movie personally eventually. But I think that, it's really cool to have them immerse themselves in actual games to get inspiration from this. Like, they followed around different AI to see how they actually do things in their day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just like they're putting people inside of this. Like, they really thought about, okay, an AI would do this. Like, they would have a daily routine. And in the movie, it's like he's getting bored of being killed, because it's like every single day I just get killed, because I think he's supposed to be a bank teller in like a GTA-esque world. So of course everyone's coming to rob the bank all the time, because why not? And I the whole X-Men movie just started playing somehow.
That's all good. I pulled that down, but yeah,
Um,
I think it's funny. Like you said, it's I I think it's interesting how you brought up two movies, Wreck-It Ralph and Jumanji. About we've seen video game movies in the past, and they're either like that, they're either like here's like people getting thrown into like an old arcade type game universe, and like the game concept there are pretty simplistic. It's like, oh, you have a score, we gotta win. It's just kind of like a general video game knowledge of like an old school game. Versus you have other video game movies where it's like we're gonna recreate this universe, and like like here's Tomb Raider, but it's Angelina Jolie instead. It's not just like a video game character. Like they're just trying to like Hollywoodify these stories, and it's like I feel like there's no real middle ground of like either telling a video game narrative in a really intricate and respectful way, or doing something like this where you're telling a video game, a video game itself story with a game archetype of like this like video game universe, and giving it the respect of like what actual modern games are. And I don't think you see that often whatsoever. So that's actually it's like kind of like a breath of fresh air with that take on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really cool concept.
For sure. And I'm hoping that in the future that, concepts like that become more widespread. Because I think as, genres and, just different media like film and TV and games combine, I think that'll just be better for storytelling in general. I mean, I love storytelling games. Obviously, I'm a big RPG fan. I like narrative single-player games. That's really like kind of my go-to genre.
Yeah,
I'd say.
same.
So with that, it's like it's good to see. Like we talked a lot about this last week, so I won't get back into it again. But things like The Last of Us getting an HBO show with like a bigger budget than Game of Thrones, like for their first season. It's like literally the most. It's literally the most expensive TV show of all time. Like period.
Oh my gosh!
Like the third season is more expensive than the last season of Game of Thrones. So like that's a lot of respect on The Last of Us to be like, we're just gonna go all out and make this like a property that like everybody's gonna know. That's gonna be the biggest HBO show ever. So like everybody's gonna know The Last of Us, whether you're a video game person or not. You're gonna know that property probably if it's like if they're putting that much money and effort into it. So just stuff like that. It's great to see like that there is a shift in the tone of like the old like arcade adage of like video games are for kids that are just playing. It's just a distraction. Like I there's no educational value and that's all it is. But no, like video games are not just a genre. They're not just an activity for a certain group of people. It's literally this it's interactive media. It's this broad environment of any experience you could possibly have. And it's the same thing with movies. Like if you watch, a Pixar movie and then you watch a Tarantino movie, those would be two different things to you. Those aren't like one's terribly gory and like violent and horrific, and one's like a family picture. And if you watch one of those things, be like, you watch one, R-rated movie, be like, oh, this is terrible for children. It's an adult medium. Movies are for adults. You can't, and I think people need to realize video games are a medium. They're not a genre. They're not a fad. They're not going away. Like you see things changing. They're just expanding. Like and it'll continue to be like that. And I think that in this technological world we're living in, and with the expectations of video games and what we expect to be delivered, I just think that games are only getting more expensive. I think the rest of they're also the biggest money-making industry in the world. Games make more money than movies. They make more money than books or YouTube or any entertainment industry. They make more money, just period. And maybe that's mostly from microtransactions. Maybe that's from people buying, credit cards on Grand Theft Auto and all those kind of extra income that comes with video games. But a lot of millions and millions of people play video games, and I think the rest of the rest of the world and the rest of media is starting to give video games that respect it kind of deserves in terms of having narrative merit and having that weight for, to carry these like serious television series and films that aren't just kind of cash grab. Here's like just like taking this brand and like reforming it into a movie instead of actually, supporting these characters. So I think it's a great thing for storytelling in general and for video games, of course.
For sure. It's definitely getting more respect, and that's always a good thing. One size does not fit all with video games, as with any other kind of media. So,
Absolutely. I think we're running out of time here. About 2 minutes left. I think we could probably close it off there at the hour mark. But we
okay.
got through a lot of stories today.
Yeah.
Happy we had time to get through all that.
Yeah, I'm super excited to play the Forgotten City as its standalone version and Scrabdackle when it comes out. I think that one, the Forgotten City, is fully out on Steam at least, and maybe other platforms. Scrabdackle, I don't think will be coming out for a long time, but the demo is available on itch. So I'm really excited for both of those.
Yeah, and I guess just to wrap up our show, to wrap up other things coming out soon. Again, we talked about that Call of Duty event happening this Friday. I believe there's a new release for Ghost of Tsushima. If you've heard of that, the samurai PlayStation exclusive game, the Game of the Year contender last year. They're releasing a new expansion for that on Friday as well, which will be interesting. And then I believe in the coming weeks we're having a lot of betas upcoming for a lot of the fall games. But unfortunately, it's just that delay season when it comes to COVID and again, those real life limitations. In this case, it's a worldwide pandemic, so we're seeing working at home and everything else that goes along with that.
Oh, just that little detail, yeah,
just,
no
just
problem.
That little flu that's going around. So
yeah,
unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of the movies and the games and the entertainment that we want to see this fall. That being said, there's a lot to look forward to, and I think it's important that we focused on these interesting and like looks into the development of new stories, new content, new games, and the passion is still there, the inspiration is still there, and I think we're just going to see better things to come. So it shouldn't be doom and gloom these days. I think a lot of the gaming discussion recently has just been about these new consoles, people can't buy anything, no games coming out. It's like, let's just all remember, like, this is an art form. We went into this industry because we love games and we love the experiences to bring us, and there's so many great experiences both out now and coming out in the future. So I think it's just a good reminder to let's just be excited for all this stuff, and we get to talk about video games. So like, how cool is that? So definitely just another little theme for the day there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for hosting.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. And that is another Endless Report, week 4. Thank you so much for tuning in. Any other last thoughts, Kaela, or is that it?
Nope. Signing off.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.